I thought the biggest surprise was finding out we were having a baby, but nothing prepared me for what her doctor would confess next. A hidden affair. A doctor with questionable ethics. And a plan to keep me in the dark, all of it unraveled in a way I never saw coming. My name's Jack and I was married to Emily for 6 years. We first met at a wedding for a mutual friend. From the first moment we spoke, I felt drawn to her. She had this charm, this wit, and a smile that made the whole room feel lighter. When she agreed to marry me, I honestly thought I'd won the jackpot. Emily worked as a marketing manager and she always threw herself into her job. Long hours weren't anything new and late nights were just part of the deal. But recently, something started to shift. It's hard to put into words, but there was this strange emotional gap growing between us. She'd come home even later than usual, always with a story about some big project or urgent meeting. I tried to trust her, I really did. She's always been career-focused, so I brushed off my concerns for a while. But slowly, subtle things began to catch my attention. It really started to feel different about 3 months back. Emily became oddly protective of her phone. She started keeping its screen down on the table and wouldn't even leave it behind when she went to the bathroom. That was new for us. We never had issues around privacy like that. At first, I thought maybe I was just being overly suspicious. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. But there was this tight feeling in my gut that just wouldn't let go. Around the same time, she began mentioning a new gynecologist. I didn't think much of it initially. After all, we all need to look after our health. She casually mentioned him, saying things like, "Dr. Benson is super thorough," or "He really knows how to make you feel at ease." On the surface, it all sounded normal. But then I noticed how often she was visiting him. Far more frequently than what I assumed was typical. That knot in my stomach started to twist tighter. I'm not the kind of guy who jumps to wild conclusions. But something just didn't add up. There was this gnawing sense that I wasn't getting the whole picture, and soon I'd realize I wasn't wrong. This was just the beginning. What followed was even more painful than I could have imagined. A couple of weeks ago, Emily came home wearing this radiant smile. One of those big, glowing smiles that used to make me feel like everything in the world was just right. For a second, I let myself believe maybe we were turning a corner. I was relaxing on the couch, half focused on the TV, when she walked right up to me, stood there for a second, and then dropped the bomb. "I'm pregnant," she said. I sat there, stunned. My heart skipped a beat and I felt this overwhelming rush of emotions, shock, happiness, confusion, everything all at once. We hadn't really been trying for a baby. Sure, we talked about it here and there, but it always felt like a distant plan, not something that was happening now. And suddenly, there she was, standing in front of me, telling me we were going to be parents. I got up and hugged her, trying to process what she just told me. Part of me was thrilled. I'd always imagined having a family someday, and the thought of raising a child with Emily felt like the next natural chapter. But as the joy tried to settle in, that same unease from before came crawling back. I gently pulled away and asked, "How far along are you?" "About 8 weeks," she said, beaming. "Dr. Benson's been taking care of everything. That's why I've been going in for checkups so often." And just like that, everything started to make a strange sort of sense. The endless appointments, the way she'd been guarding her phone, the extra time away, it all lined up. Or at least I convinced myself it did. I wanted to believe this was the real reason for the distance. Maybe she'd been nervous, waiting until the timing felt right to tell me. But even while I tried to embrace the moment, there was still this small voice in my head. Quiet but persistent. Something about how she said his name, Dr. Benson, felt too personal, too familiar. Like there was something deeper she wasn't saying. I didn't want to ruin the moment, so I kept my questions to myself. I hugged her again and we spent the rest of the evening sitting on that couch, tossing around baby names and imagining what life as parents would look like. For a while, I let myself believe everything was okay. But as the days ticked by, that sinking feeling only grew stronger. That thought just wouldn't leave me. Was Emily hiding something from me? About 2 weeks after she broke the news about the pregnancy, we were gearing up for one of those big moments, finding out if we were having a boy or a girl. We'd scheduled the ultrasound together and I was actually looking forward to it. I felt this mix of nerves and hope, like maybe things were finally starting to feel real, maybe even good again. Like maybe this baby would bring us closer. The appointment was set for 5:30 in the evening. I'd planned to sneak out of work a little early so I could get there on time, but of course life had other ideas. My boss pulled me into a last-minute meeting and by the time I got out, I was already behind. I fired off a quick text to Emily to let her know I was on my way, but I could feel my chest tighten with that anxious frustration. I hate being late, especially for something this important. I rushed into the clinic, practically jogging down the hallway toward Dr. Benson's office. Right before I reached the door, I slowed down, trying to catch my breath, trying to get my mind right before I walked in. That's when I heard voices. I paused. Emily's voice filtered through the closed door, and what she said stopped me cold. "Don't touch me now. My husband will be here any minute." My heart dropped. I stood there frozen, trying to make sense of what I just heard. It didn't sound like a joke or some harmless misunderstanding. There was something in her tone, firm, maybe even a little desperate. It felt like she was warning someone, not teasing. My legs were shaking, but I made myself take a deep breath. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I had to stay calm. So I pushed the door open like nothing happened. Inside, Emily and Dr. Benson were standing near the ultrasound equipment. They both looked startled just for a second, like I'd caught them off guard. But Dr. Benson quickly switched into that polished professional mode. "Jack, good to see you," he said with a smile, gesturing toward the chair beside Emily. "Perfect timing, we're just getting started." Emily turned to me with a bright smile, one that felt just a little too forced. "You made it," she said, her voice chipper. "I was worried you'd miss it." I sat down next to her, trying to act normal, but my mind was spiraling. Her words, those exact words, kept repeating in my head like a broken record. What had she meant by that? Who was she talking to like that? I told myself maybe I misheard. Maybe she was just anxious about the appointment. Maybe she didn't want to start the ultrasound without me. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Dr. Benson dimmed the lights and started the scan. His tone was light, walking us through everything on the screen, the baby's tiny head, little limbs, and then, eventually, the big reveal. I tried to stay present, to focus on what should have been a joyful moment, but every glance between Emily and Dr. Benson felt loaded with something unspoken. I watched them carefully. A laugh that lingered a little too long. A glance that felt too familiar. I didn't want to be that guy, paranoid, jealous, suspicious without reason, but something felt off and I couldn't ignore it. Still, I said nothing. I smiled at the blurry screen, nodded along to Dr. Benson's explanations, and acted like everything was just fine. But inside I felt like I was unraveling. We walked out of that clinic with a little ultrasound picture in our hands, something we should have been overjoyed about. Emily was glowing, talking about nursery ideas and baby names. I tried to match her energy, to soak in the moment. But those words I heard before walking in kept clawing at my thoughts. On the drive home we chatted about the baby. She mentioned colors for the nursery, books she wanted to read, how we'd need to baby-proof the apartment. I wanted so badly to just be in that moment with her. To believe this was the start of something beautiful. But that voice in my head kept whispering that something wasn't right. So, I decided to bring it up casually, like it was no big deal. "Hey, when's your next appointment with Dr. Benson?" I asked, glancing her way, trying to sound lighthearted. "I want to make sure I can be there next time. Don't want work getting in the way again." She didn't miss a beat. "It's in 2 weeks," she said, like she already had the answer lined up. "Just a quick checkup. Nothing special." I nodded, smiling just enough to keep the conversation easy. "Good. I want to be there for everything. Just make sure you don't skip any appointments, all right? Gotta keep our little one safe." She chuckled softly and reached over to squeeze my hand. "You worry too much, Jack. Everything's fine." But as she smiled and turned her attention back to the road, I couldn't stop asking myself, was she really being honest? Or was she just good at hiding the truth? I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there was something about how smoothly she answered, how quickly she changed the subject. It felt rehearsed. Like she knew I was going to ask. And that scared me more than anything else. I told myself I'd let it go, for now at least. I didn't want to jump to conclusions or start a fight over a gut feeling. There wasn't any hard proof, just these uneasy thoughts I couldn't quite shake. But pretending everything was normal was starting to wear me down. I was beginning to realize I couldn't keep doing this much longer. The truth was, I wasn't ready to face whatever my instincts were trying to tell me. Not yet. But deep down, I had a sense that I wouldn't be able to avoid it forever. It had been 2 weeks since that ultrasound appointment, and even though Emily was carrying on like everything was perfectly fine, smiling, making plans, talking about the baby, I couldn't stop that uneasy feeling from growing. Something didn't add up, and the more I tried to brush it off, the louder those thoughts got. I felt like I was on the outside of something I was supposed to be part of. I knew she had another checkup with Dr. Benson that afternoon. She hadn't invited me and I hadn't brought it up. But as the day went on, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept replaying the moment outside the ultrasound room, the way she'd said, "Don't touch me," with that edge in her voice. I needed to know if my imagination was playing tricks on me or if there really was something going on behind my back. So I left work early. Didn't text, didn't call. I just got in my car and headed to the clinic. I parked a block away so she wouldn't spot my truck. I felt ridiculous, like some jealous fool snooping around. But I had to see it with my own eyes. If I was wrong, I'd deal with the embarrassment. But if I wasn't, I slipped into the clinic quietly, head down. I'd been there enough times to know exactly where Dr. Benson's office was. My heart was pounding by the time I reached the hallway. I stood outside his door, frozen. A part of me wanted to turn around and leave, to spare myself from whatever I might see. But then I heard it. Voices. Not the kind of exchange you'd expect between a doctor and his patient. There was something different in the tone, too familiar, too casual. My fists clenched at my sides, and before I could stop myself, I pushed the door open. What I walked in on made my blood run hot. There was Dr. Benson, leaning over Emily, who was lying back on the exam chair. His hands were on her, not in a medical way, not professionally. The way he was standing, the way they looked at each other when I barged in, it wasn't innocent. It wasn't clinical. Emily's eyes went wide the moment she saw me. Pure panic. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but I didn't wait. I stormed across the room, my vision going blurry from the rage surging through me. What the heck do you think you're doing? I shouted, grabbing Dr. Benson by the collar of his white coat. Before he could answer, I swung. My fist landed hard on his jaw, sending him stumbling back into the wall. For a moment, the whole room fell silent, except for my heavy breathing. Emily let out a scream and jumped up from the chair, her face pale. Jack, stop. What are you doing? She cried, her voice shaking. I couldn't even look at her. My eyes were locked on Dr. Benson, who now had his hands up, trying to look calm and in control. You don't understand, he said quietly. It's not what you think. I laughed, this ugly, broken laugh, because how many times had I heard that line in movies? But this wasn't a movie. This was my life. Not what I think? I said, my voice cracking. You're touching my wife in a clinic room, and you want me to believe it's all just a misunderstanding? Emily rushed toward me, grabbing my arm. Her eyes were wide, pleading. Jack, please. Let me explain. But I couldn't. Not then. My mind was racing. Everything I'd been trying to ignore, the phone secrecy, the strange way she spoke about him, the frequent visits, all of it crashed down on me at once. I yanked my arm out of her grip and stepped back, shaking my head. I couldn't even form full thoughts, let alone figure out what to say. My heart was pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. And the worst part? I knew the explanation was coming, but I already felt like I knew the truth. I don't even remember how I got home that day. Everything after I walked out of that office is a blur. I think Emily might have called after me, but I couldn't hear her. I didn't want to. All I knew was that I had seen enough to change everything. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the whole scene over and over, the look on her face, the way Dr. Benson acted like this was no big deal. I felt like a fool, like I'd been walking around blind while the truth sat right in front of me, plain as day. I didn't want to hear her excuses anymore. I didn't need to. Whatever they had been doing, it was real. It was happening. And I had been too afraid to see it until it was too late. By the time morning rolled around, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stay in this marriage, not after what I'd seen, what I'd felt. I knew it was going to be painful. I knew it would get messy. But there was no way I could keep living in this fog of lies and half-truths, carrying around this hollow feeling like a weight on my chest. I had to end it. I called into work and told them I had a personal emergency to handle. It felt strange, almost surreal, getting in the car and driving to a lawyer's office. Like I was just another guy going through the motions of a life falling apart. But under that numbness I felt something else too, resolve. I wasn't going to keep waiting around, hoping things would get better. I needed to take back some kind of control. The attorney I met with was a steady, no-nonsense guy named Mark. He had that calm voice people use when they've seen this kind of heartbreak before. I laid everything out for him. Emily's strange behavior, the scene at the clinic, the feeling I'd had in my gut for weeks that something was wrong. He just sat there, listening carefully, writing down notes without judgment. When I finally finished talking, he nodded and said, Jack, I'm sorry you're going through this. But if you're sure this is the path you want to take, we can get the paperwork started today. It's going to take time, but I'll help you through every step. There wasn't a flicker of hesitation in me. Yes, I said. I want to move forward with the divorce. Mark explained everything, how property would be handled, finances, the possible custody implications if the child really was mine. It was a lot to take in, but strangely, I felt lighter walking out of that office than I had in weeks. Like I was finally making a choice for me, for my own peace of mind. When I got home that afternoon, Emily was there, waiting. Her eyes were red and puffy, her expression somewhere between panic and heartbreak. I didn't even have to say a word, she already knew. She came toward me quickly, her voice trembling. "Jack, we need to talk. Please, just let me explain." I stopped her before she could get another word out. "It's too late, Emily. I already filed." Those words hit the room like a hammer. She stood there, frozen, like she hadn't expected me to actually do it. Then her face crumpled and she started crying. "Please, you don't understand." "No," I said, keeping my voice steady even though it hurt to speak. "I understand more than enough. I trusted you. And you broke that." She reached out, trying to touch my arm, but I stepped back. I couldn't let myself fall into that pattern again, feeling sorry, second-guessing myself, forgiving too quickly. "I'm pregnant," she whispered like it was her last lifeline. "It's your baby, Jack. Ours." The words hit hard. They really did. But I didn't let it show. "I don't even know what's true anymore," I said, my voice catching for a second. "You say it's mine, but after everything, how do I believe you?" She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing, and I stood there for a long moment, torn between heartbreak and fury. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to believe her. But more than anything, I wanted to protect what little was left of me. "I'm done talking," I said finally. "The lawyers will handle the rest." And with that, I turned and walked out of the room. She didn't follow. I don't know if she was too shocked or just gave up. But either way, I knew there was no turning back now. The days that followed weren't easy. The anger didn't fade, it grew. So did the pain. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that scene in the clinic. Every time I tried to move on, it came back like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. And no matter how much I wanted to let it go, I couldn't. Dr. Benson hadn't just crossed a line. He'd blown past it without a second thought. I couldn't let him walk away from this without facing any consequences. I knew confronting him directly wouldn't get me anywhere. He'd lie, deny it all, and I'd come off looking like the unhinged husband. But if I could find proof, something undeniable, I could end his career just like he'd helped destroy my marriage. I figured the truth had to be on Emily's phone. She used to guard it like a treasure chest, always keeping it close. But since everything had come out, she'd grown more careless, maybe thinking there wasn't anything left to hide. One night, while she was in the shower, I saw her phone sitting on the dresser. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I didn't want to do it. I hated the idea of snooping. But I couldn't look the other way anymore. I unlocked it. It was still using the same passcode, and started going through her texts. Most of it was normal. Conversations with coworkers. Messages from friends. I was starting to think I'd made a mistake. And then I saw it. A message thread with someone named Rob M. But the messages didn't read like they were from a friend or a colleague. The tone was intimate, flirty, familiar. I scrolled back and saw the truth I'd been avoiding. Messages from Dr. Benson under a fake name. The messages themselves weren't long. They weren't emotional or detailed. They were quiet, cold, repetitive. Same time today. Let me know if anything changes. Your payment for my silence. That last one hit like a truck. I just sat there staring at those words. Payment for my silence. My stomach turned. My whole body went numb. What did that even mean? Silence about what? I kept scrolling, going back further in the thread. The messages were always the same. Short, deliberate. Like two people trying not to say too much. It wasn't passionate, it was calculated. Routine. They had a system. A pattern. But those 5 words, they looped in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. Your payment for my silence. Was she paying him to keep something hidden? Was this more than just an affair? Was he blackmailing her? Using whatever power he had over her to control the situation? I thought the betrayal had already reached its peak, but somehow this felt worse. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was manipulation. This was leverage. He was exploiting her, maybe even coercing her, and that shifted everything inside me. I was done sitting on the sidelines. I took screenshots of every single message. I copied them to a flash drive, backed them up in the cloud, even emailed them to myself just in case. I wasn't going to lose this. I needed to protect myself. And maybe even protect others too. The next morning, I made an appointment with a new lawyer. Not for divorce this time, but for something bigger. His name was Evan, a sharp, focused guy who specialized in medical ethics and malpractice. When we met, I laid it all out, the affair, the scene at the clinic, the messages on Emily's phone, and that one message that changed everything. He didn't interrupt. He didn't flinch. He just listened. When I was done, he closed the folder in front of him, leaned back in his chair and said, "Jack, this is serious. More than serious. If we can connect the dots between his position as her doctor and this inappropriate relationship, and prove he was accepting compensation to keep it quiet, it could be the end of his license. Possibly even criminal charges. That was all I needed to hear. I handed over everything I had, copies of the messages, a written account of what I saw, and anything else that could help build the case. Evans said he'd contact the state medical board and begin the formal complaint. He warned me it wouldn't be quick, but it was solid. And it was enough. Walking out of that office, I felt like something inside me had settled. Not peace exactly, but something close. A small sense of control in a world that had been spinning out for weeks. This wasn't just about what Dr. Benson did to my marriage. This was about what he could do to others if no one stopped him. He had to lose it all, his title, his practice, his power. That was the only justice I could live with. But just as things were starting to move forward, I got a call that threw me right back into the storm. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something told me to answer. Jack, the voice said immediately. I recognized it in an instant. Dr. Benson. We need to talk. I felt my pulse spike, but I didn't let it show. There's nothing left to say. I've filed the complaint. It's out of my hands now. You don't understand, he said, his voice low and urgent. There's more to this than you think. And if you're smart, you'll hear me out. I almost hung up. I almost didn't care. But something about his tone, shaky, cornered, kept me listening. Your wife, he continued. The baby she's carrying, it's not yours. And it's not mine either. I stood frozen, the phone pressed to my ear, completely stunned. I'd known deep down that something wasn't right, maybe even suspected that there were more layers to the betrayal, but this was a twist I never saw coming. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely more than a breath. Dr. Benson let out a slow, deliberate exhale, like he was preparing for impact. The baby, he said. It's not yours. But it's not mine either. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. She came to me because she was terrified, he continued, his voice level, like he was giving a diagnosis. Emily knew the child wasn't yours and she was desperate to keep you from finding out. She asked me to help her. To fake the paternity test. She wanted to make it look like the baby was yours so you wouldn't question anything. His words hit like a punch straight to the chest. My legs felt unsteady, like the floor was slipping out from under me. And you just went along with it? I managed to get out, my voice trembling with disbelief and disgust. I didn't have much of a choice, he said, his voice going cold. I told her if she wanted my silence, she'd have to give me something in return. And she did. That's how it all started. I tightened my grip on the phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold it. So you coerced her, I said slowly. You knew she was vulnerable, scared, and you used that to get what you wanted. She agreed, he said bluntly. It was an arrangement. You call it what you want. My blood boiled. You took advantage of her, I snapped. Of me. You turned your office into your playground and thought no one would ever catch on. Because of you, he said bitterly, everything is falling apart. My practice, my career, my name, gone. All because you couldn't just let it go. I took a long, slow breath, trying to steady the fury in my voice. So what's the point of this call? You looking for sympathy? You think I'll feel bad for you? No, he said quickly. I'm giving you a chance. Take back the complaint. Walk away. And I disappear. No one has to know what really happened. You can start over and this all goes away. I paused. I let the silence stretch just long enough for his words to land in the pit of my stomach. Then I said, thank you. He hesitated. What? Thank you, I said again, calmer now. Because now I have your words. I've recorded this call. Everything you've just admitted to, you handed me the final nail in your own coffin. There was dead silence on the line. I'm not backing down, Dr. Benson, I continued. You manipulated her, violated every oath you ever swore as a doctor, and tried to intimidate me into silence. But it's over. You're done. You're making a mistake, he said quietly, his voice suddenly small, like he knew he'd lost. You don't understand who you're dealing with. No, I said. You're the one who doesn't understand. You thought you could get away with everything. But now I'm going to make sure everyone sees who you really are. I hung up without waiting for another word. I stood there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, heart still racing. My whole world had just shifted again. The betrayal had gone deeper than I ever imagined, but at least now I had the truth. And that was something. The days that followed were filled with paperwork, meetings, statements. The complaint was moving forward, and the case against Dr. Benson was building fast. He was being investigated not just for misconduct, but for coercion and falsifying medical information. His days of practicing medicine were numbered, and I was going to see it through no matter how long it took. And then, the divorce went through. After everything, Emily didn't even try to fight it. The truth had stripped her of whatever power she once held. There were no more stories to spin. No more secrets to keep. The marriage ended with signatures and silence, and we went our separate ways. Her broken and exposed, me exhausted but resolute. A few weeks later, I heard from a friend that Emily had given birth. She never reached out. Part of me hoped she would. I guess I needed to hear her say the truth out loud to face me one more time. But she didn't. And that silence hurt more than I expected. Still, I had to know for sure. I needed closure, some sliver of certainty in the mess she left behind. So I arranged for a DNA test. Quietly. Privately. I needed to know whether the child was mine. Maybe, just maybe, there was something left of the life I thought I had. Maybe, by some miracle, this baby was mine, and I could salvage a piece of my future. But deep down, I already knew the answer. The results came in. I opened the envelope slowly, like the words inside might change if I gave them enough time. But there it was, clear as day, confirmation of what I had feared all along. The baby wasn't mine. Even though I had prepared myself, even though I'd spent days telling myself I already knew the truth, seeing it written out like that still felt like getting hit by a train. The last shred of hope I'd been holding onto was gone. Every doubt, every moment I'd tried to push aside, it all came flooding back. That was the final fracture. The illusion was shattered. Emily never reached out again after that. I didn't expect her to, and truthfully, I wouldn't have answered if she had. She was left with the consequences of the choices she made, the lies, the betrayal, the wreckage of a marriage that didn't need to end this way. But that was her reality now. And I wasn't part of it. For me, the focus shifted. Dr. Benson was still out there, and I couldn't let him walk away untouched. Thanks to the complaint I'd filed, and the mountain of evidence I'd collected, the investigation by the medical board moved fast. When the hearing started, I was there, front row. I wasn't just a name on paper. I wanted him to see me. To see what he had helped destroy. And I wasn't the only one. As the trial progressed, more women came forward. One by one they took the stand, telling stories that were all too familiar, stories of being manipulated, pressured, made to feel powerless during moments when they should have been protected. He had used his position to exploit not just Emily but so many others. Each testimony added another crack to the image of the respected doctor he had once pretended to be. I listened to every word, jaw tight, heart pounding. The anger I felt wasn't just for what he did to me, it was for what he did to them. For the way he hid behind that white coat, using it like a shield while he preyed on the people who trusted him most. By the end, there was no saving him. He was found guilty of misconduct, of coercion, of using his authority to manipulate vulnerable women. The medical board revoked his license and the court sentenced him to prison. Years behind bars. Years to think about what he'd done. When the judge read the sentence, I felt still. Not joyful. Not triumphant. Just still. Like I had finally reached the end of a storm I never asked to be part of. The damage was done. But justice, real justice, had been served. After the trial, I needed time to breathe. To grieve not just the loss of a marriage but the version of my life I thought I had. I spent time with family. I poured myself into work. I started to rebuild, not all at once but piece by piece. I'm not the man I was before all of this. Maybe that's a good thing. I've learned to trust my gut. I've learned to speak up even when it's hard. I've learned that walking away doesn't mean weakness, it means choosing peace over chaos. Months have passed. The divorce is finalized. Dr. Benson is behind bars. And me? I'm learning how to live again. As for Emily, I hear bits and pieces. I don't go looking, but sometimes her name surfaces through mutual friends. Apparently, the man she had the affair with disappeared the moment he found out about the baby. Left her to face it all on her own. No support, no family to back her up. Just her and a child, scraping by with odd jobs, struggling to hold things together. It's not revenge. I don't wish her pain. But I can't deny there's a kind of closure in knowing that the truth eventually caught up with her. She built a life on deception, and it crumbled. I didn't come out of this unscathed, but I came out stronger. I'm not sure where the road leads from here. But I know I'm walking it as a man who survived the storm, who stared betrayal in the face and didn't let it define him. That's my victory. And no one, not Emily, not Dr. Benson, can take that away from me.